Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This thread is 14 years old. Image data has been lost to time.
Food for thought before I go to bed, and this thread gets trolled or saged into oblivion. I work a shitty job at a retail store here in Southern California. Back when I first got hired, I did graveyard shift for 2.5 months, watching the store at night with a manager and sometimes one other guy. Around the backside of the store is this secondary warehouse we call the rat room for obvious reasons. One night, the manager sends the new guy, they never last long on the graveyard shift, Chris, out to grab some supplies at some god-awful hour of the night. For some reason, he implores me to go with him this time. I decided to go out of boredom and to accompany my friend on the cold and shitty walk. We reach the room uneventfully and go inside. He tells me that he always gets creeped out when he gets sent out here. I kind of laughed it off. The rat room is bright and we're both adults. It seemed obvious that he was trying to fuck with me. Like any good rat's nest, the room was piled with old furniture and other garbage. We quickly found what we were looking for when I heard whispering. So I turned to Chris and asked him, "Did you hear that?" He nods. I try to think about it rationally. There's an Office Max next door. I've been in the rat room when they're open and sound carries through the walls. By now, the whispering has stopped, and I ask him once again if he heard that. He nods again and says nothing. We quickly make our way back to the door with the tools we needed when the whispering starts again once more. It moves from one side of the rat room to the other. To clarify, the rat room is actually quite large. We locked up and went back to the store. On the way back, we checked into Office Max. It was locked up tight. Their warehouse lights were off too. We told each other the rats made the noises, even though we asked each other if we heard what the person was saying, and worked the rest of the night without incident. That's not all. Like I said, I usually worked alone while the manager did his own thing out in the store. The store warehouse has lights that are motion activated. Needless to say, when I'm busy alone at my desk, all of the lights turn off except the one above me. One night, while processing paperwork, I heard the distinctive click of one of the lights registering movement. I figured my manager had come to check up on me, and I looked out into the dark warehouse. I saw a single light on an island of luminescence, if you will, with no one there. If my manager had come into the warehouse, a path of light would have lit up from the door inwards. Then the next light lit up, then the next, until they reached my desk. I never did find the rat that managed to trigger human-sized motion detectors. A while after I got moved off of the shitty third shift, I was talking to a guy who used to do the graveyard shift a year before I started working there. I told him in a very tongue-in-cheek way that the store was haunted. He looked at me very seriously and said, "You too?" I thought we were pulling my leg, but asked for his story anyway. Like me, he used to work alone. One night, while replacing products on shelves for the morning crew, he dropped a CD on the ground. He bent over to grab it when he saw movement in the corner of his eye. A few aisles over, the base decks of the CD racks used to be little more than aluminum grates, so you could see several aisles over. He saw someone crawling. I don't mean on hands and knees, I mean like dragging themselves slowly. So he blinks once and does a double take. Of course, the apparition is gone, and he blames the incident on sleep deprivation. A likely story. Closing this story with a sigh instead of a bang. In another unrelated event, I was talking to an older guy I know who's lived on the Palos Verdes hill for ages now. We got to talking about the history of my store. It's been a Best Buy for almost 18, 19 years now, and before that was a generic department store, sort of like a Macy's. My dad used to shop there with my grandparents as a kid. I guess it closed for a few years. So he tells me an interesting story about those intervening years. Now, take what I'm about to tell you with a pinch of salt. It's pretty out there, and I haven't found any newspaper clippings about it. The landowner of the time, with some police shortly after, entered the building, possibly to pave the way for Best Buy, and found what was apparently some kind of pagan cult. The motion-activated alarms were installed by Best Buy, you must realize. They found dead animals, cots for people to sleep on, pentagrams, all sorts of stupid B-movie shit. The receiving dock in the warehouse where my desk is where the worst of the cult garbage was. They found a dead cow hanging by hooks from the ceiling. Hard to believe, I know, I don't believe it myself. But Torrance is a cop town. Anyone who lives here or nearby knows that all of the cops had fathers who were cops and their families are into cop stuff. That's how these stories get passed down. I thought it made a good story at any rate. I have other ones, some from Okinawa, some a little closer to home, like my visit to the abandoned hospital in East LA. But I'm tired. Okay, I'll fulfill the request for a local Angelino first. There's an abandoned hospital in East LA. It's just off the 5 freeway in Boyle Heights. If you know where Hollenbeck Park is, it's literally the front yard of that hospital. Linda Vista Hospital. If you try to find it on Google Maps, it'll say Boyle Heights Lofts. But that's because a real estate agent tried to tear it down. It's now under the National History Registry or something and protected, so that plan fell under. A lot of production companies like to use it for shoots. It's been in a lot of movies and music videos. It was in a recent Duran Duran song about rehab or something. Anyway, I decided to sneak in there and hang out for the night. Pick related. It's the hospital. For some reason, I have it tagged 1924 in my photo album. I think that's the construction date. You can probably Google the so-called hauntings of the hospital. A little girl can be seen running around at night by would-be intruders. Moans and screams are heard by neighbors in the middle of the night. You can sometimes see a man in a suit, locals call him the doctor, peering out of the windows. These are all easily debunked except for the little girl. The building is almost 100 years old. Old buildings creak and groan under their own weight. The building does have a caretaker that lives next door, and the place is often scoped by production companies. A man in a suit means a director scoping the place out. Be that as it may, I wanted to check the place out. The plan was to go with 1 or 2 friends and just hang out in there at night. People have been in there before, and you can find pictures of people who went before me if your Google foo is strong enough. I went there once in the daytime and found a window elevated off the ground that I could climb up to. The only window without bars. I guess the caretaker thinks no one is nimble enough to get up there. It was also unlocked. I planned to return that night with a friend to see what's up. Next to that window was another identical one. That window was locked, but through the dusty panes I could see some unused furniture. It appeared to be some kind of office. This is important later. Someone told me that shortly after my final visit they got a guard dog. Be careful. They must have seen me running off the property trying not to scream like a little girl. Anyway, my friends bail on me. Church the next day, work, babysitting, they all wuss out, so I go alone. This is probably my only chance to get in. So I drive up to downtown LA with some dark clothes, my flashlight, a camera, and my cell phone. I leap over the chain link fence guarding the property and run up to my point of entry. I climb up the wall, squeeze halfway in through the window. As you can tell, I'm skinny. The window is like 7 inches wide, so good luck to my fatter colleagues. Pull out my flashlight from the pocket that is now instead of the building. Hit the button. Click. Nothing. The battery decided to die right then and there. I decided to call my friend Rob. He picks up and I tell him that I'm here. He can't believe that I actually went alone. I tell him about my situation, how I'm starting to feel real anxious without any light. He reminds me of how I told him we shouldn't use flashlights so the caretaker can't see us. That doesn't help. After a few minutes, he tells me over the phone that I can't turn back now. I'm literally halfway there. From the window down to the ground, it's about 4 feet. I know that if I take that leap of faith, if some demon child or ghostly nurse tries to get me, I'm going to have to scramble fast up to that window. I'm only 5'8". So I do it. I jump down into a rather peculiar room. Rob asked me if I was in, and I told him I was. I was trying not to panic. Asking myself what there was to panic about helped me calm down. I told him what I saw. To my right was a dresser. The tiles were sort of colorful, and through the almost stifling darkness, I could see some kind of fountain, relief, something in the wall. I remarked that it didn't seem like it would be standard hospital decor. Then it hit me. I told him I was in a funeral home. He told me not to go scaring myself, but I knew I was. Right above the building I entered was a smokestack. It came out of the crematorium, which was below ground level. I took a deep breath and left the room into the corridor outside. I started to tell myself that it's just an old building. Of course, no ghostly patients or demon doctors dragged me to hell, but I then understood the scope of the hospital. To my left, the corridor stretched for what seemed like forever into darkness. I could see moonbeams penetrating some skylight above me. To my immediate left was the entrance to that room I peeked into earlier. I guessed it was a parish. Ever get a bad feeling? Kinda like a sixth sense. Like some kind of self-preservation circuit kicks in and tells you not to go somewhere or do something. You don't realize what it is. Maybe it's something you smell that triggers something primeval in your brain. Maybe it's you subconsciously thinking of rusty nails in there. Or maybe it's just that childhood fear of the dark. I got one of those bad feelings from that room. I told myself I didn't want to hit my head and pass out in there. To my right was a kitchen. In front of me was a wide double door leading into, from what I could see, was a larger room than the one I had exited from. Open space seemed like a good idea, so I went in there first. I should tell you now that I put Rob on speakerphone and was using light from my camera flash a la Saw 1 and my cell phone to light my way. Jackpot. It was a chapel. I described to Rob what I saw. I could almost hear the jealousy in his voice. I made a quick circle around the place of worship to see if I could find any artifacts to take home with me. Nothing, of course. By now, I was getting really confident and started to repeat to Rob the plan that we had originally laid out. It made sense to us to move to the basement first, take the corpse tunnel to the morgue, from there to the insane asylum, and then move up, eventually reaching the 4th floor, the Howard Hughes private suite apparently. I'd heard a few groans and moans by now, but like I said, old buildings eventually start to feel the pull of gravity on their bulk. Yes, I had the clarity of thought to keep a picture. To my right are windows overlooking where the ambulance would come in. To the left, unseen, is the door I entered from. I was feeling really confident now. I was no longer hiding my footfalls. I raised my voice a bit, and even sat in one of the pews to rest my feet. I told Rob that I was going to try to find the stairs down to the boiler room and crematorium now. I went over to the kitchen. You can't see it in the original photo, but to the left, there were stairs leading down. My courage faltered for an instant. I saw rusty pipes, stairs that I couldn't quite see the bottom of, and strange objects covered in an inky darkness. A very real fear of injuring myself settled in. So instead I took this picture of an MRI frame on my way back to the chapel. The chapel is through the door on the right. The original room is to the left. These pictures obviously don't really tell you how dark it was in there. If not for the camera flash, you wouldn't be able to see the MRI frame. He asked me what had happened. He was worried. He was about to call the cops. I cupped the phone to my mouth and very quietly, hoarsely whispered that I heard something. I didn't say what it was, but he seemed to understand. I told him I needed to get the fuck out of there. That feeling I got from the parish grew. It seemed like it pushed the air out of the very room I was in. The horrible fact that I had to pass by it to my only known exit complicated matters. Rob also reminded me of the nagging fact that I had not completed my mission. I also had to find a way for us to get back into the hospital for later expeditions. There was a locked door next to the window I entered that was simply bolted from the inside. On the outside, there were only 2 Phillips head screws holding it in. My initial hypothesis was that there were also only 2 on the inside. I could simply remove the lock from the inside for later. I told Rob what I was going to do before bailing and left the chapel. I'm an atheist now, but I was raised Christian. That buried past told me the chapel was the safest place to hide. There was a long hallway that terminated into the door that I had to check out. The dust was thick enough that I could feel it through my boots. I approached the door, took some pictures, and brought out my screwdriver to test it, like I had hoped it was a really poorly done job. This entire time I had my camera flashing down the back corridor. My imagination was running wild. I half expected a girl to appear a la The Shining to ask me if I wanted to play with her. After snapping my photos, I ran back to my entry room. In a horribly panicky moment, my shirt got caught on the window pane as I was leaving. I was out. Nothing bad had happened. I still had my immortal soul, and the next night I returned with a friend. The next night I told Rob to watch my car for me while I ran up to the window to check it out. Sometime during the day it looked like the caretaker had locked the window. It didn't really make any difference. There was another window I could climb up to that dropped down into the crematorium. I knew for a fact there were stairs from there, but I thought it couldn't hurt to try. I didn't want to leave any signs of forced entry, and there were enough broken panes to reach one arm in. The window is kept shut by a system of 3 locks. I reached in and grabbed the first one. It gave way without any hesitation. The next one was stubborn, so I gave it a good hearty tug. Nothing. At this time, I realized that I couldn't reach the 3rd lock without breaking the window, which sucked. But I figured it couldn't hurt to try to get the 2nd lock undone. I did, and it made a nice hearty thump-grump sound. I almost fell off of the window when I heard that. I ran back to the car. Rob pointed out that the caretaker's lights were now on, and tonight was probably an inopportune time for ghost hunting. I agreed and drove away quickly. He asked me why I looked so spooked, and I told him to try to recall the only other room in that hospital that had the same type of windows with the same locks. The parish next door had the same window locks. I apologize for another sigh, not a bang finish to a story, but sometimes that's how reality is. I'm not saying that there was a ghost. Yes, I wussed out to noises, but still. I still think about those windows. I keep imagining some kind of horrible creature crawling in through that window. A more likely story, though, if it was paranormal, is something was trying to lock me in. Since then, my friends have pressured me to go back. I can apparently get into any building I want. That's my reputation now. As a child, I did have breaking and entering, vandalism and arson levied against me once, acquitted. I don't know if I really want to go back, though. Someone told me that as recently as early this year, one of those bogus ghost hunter shows went in there and claimed to see a little girl. If you call the caretaker's office, it costs $2,000 a day to tour the building. I have more stories if you care to listen. I'll be your crypt keeper. You know that feeling you get when you're laying in bed and something is laying next to you, and you turn over and there's nothing there? Keep doing it. If you stop, that's when it starts screaming. Like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Okinawa. I used to be a fluent Japanese speaker, and according to my mother, I saw ghosts. I'm not gonna bullshit you with any stories like LOL/X/I'm a medium. I'm a skeptic to the end. Just because something funky happens doesn't mean you can attribute it to a ghost. Just because we don't have an explanation doesn't mean we don't have a logical one yet. Anyway, before the nightmares started, I was 2 or 3. My mother would lose sleep because she'd find me in my room talking to people walking around on the ceiling. I'd have conversations with them long into the night in Japanese. What is your name? Where are you from? Why are you here? Stuff like that. Overactive imagination in children, you know? It stopped when we moved to the States with my dad. And then the nightmare started. So one year we went to Acapulco, family vacation. What could go wrong? They call me 636. No, it's nothing occult or edgy lulz 666, mate. It's the displacement of my motorcycle. So we go to Acapulco on our annual family vacation. Absolutely beautiful hotel. I really wish I could remember the name, but it's so far gone now. I was 9 then, I am now 24. It was 2 parallel buildings with not 1, not 2, but 3 pools between them. Just a short distance away was a dirty little fishing village. Quaint. We stayed there for a week. It happened the last night we were there. So I get up on my hands and knees in my bed and look into the hallway outside. On the wall I can see someone's shadow has been cast across it. There's an intruder in our hotel room. You know how the movies always show people screaming when they're scared? That's bullshit. The fear reflex is making yourself unnoticeable. You freeze up. You begin to suffocate yourself because breathing is too loud. You wait for the danger to pass by. That's what I did. Whoever it was started to walk down the hallway, but there wasn't something quite right about the way the intruder moved. Imagine, if you will, the head of the shadow on a fixed point on the wall, with the body elongated behind it. The body of this shadow seemed like it caught up with the head. The body sort of slid into view. In the doorway stood a diminutive shadow person. I immediately realized what it was. It was one of those children from earlier. But it was still an intruder, and I was still only 9 years old. Things got stranger from there. It stepped into the bedroom and grew. Taller. I think the word is it began to loom. Its strides were lagged, almost like they were in slow motion, but nonetheless quite deliberate. This next part I never told anyone because it always seemed ridiculous. In the then child mind's eye, I saw this shadow person begin to lift its left arm. Next to that was my mother's purse. To a child, that seemed to break my paralysis, and I began to scream. I don't remember screaming anything that made any sense, but my parents told me after the shock wore off that I was screaming, "There's a ghost, there's a ghost," over and over. They leapt out of bed when they heard me, and whatever it was had disappeared. My father checked the room, and nothing was out of place. I sometimes resent them for this, but they took it so nonchalantly, especially my mother. I guess my mother's side of the family is superstitious, so shit like this is business as usual. Most normal families would tell you to shut up and go back to sleep. It was only until a few years ago I realized what it was actually doing. It was pointing at me. I don't know. Maybe it's silly, but I still get chills up my spine thinking about it. Almost like it's trying to say, I can see you too. Was it a ghost? Who knows? I've tried to pass it off as one of those waking dreams, old hag syndrome, etc. You guys know what I'm talking about. I'll check all of the above on that one. I was definitely awake. I haven't had a nightmare since, in case you were wondering. Oh, and one more thing. About 2 years ago, I kinda dated a girl who probably turned into a femcel, social outcast in school, into Wicca and video games. I won't bore you with the details of how I met her, just know I hung out with her for about a month. She liked to brag about one of her friends who was into black magic and the occult, and about a ghost in her house. I just liked hanging out with her because she'd play Guitar Hero with me and she raised a quail. The last time I hanged out with her, she told me about some encounter her friend had while playing with a Ouija board. The usual stuff happens and her friend claimed to see some kind of entity. While they were messing around with the centerpiece, he looked up and saw a shadow person walking down the hallway towards the game room. It stopped at the threshold and slowly pointed its left hand at him. I hadn't told her my ghost story yet. It's the one time she actually spooked me. But hey, who cares, right? I think I'm all out. A few months ago, they had a creepy stuff that happened to you while playing video games thread on /v/. My submission? I was playing something on the PC. What it was isn't relevant. My room has one wall that is basically a giant mirror. It's my closet. 2 mirrored sliding doors. Yeah, to an X-file that must seem crazy, and it did when I moved in here, but I've grown used to it. Anyway, I was playing when I heard this loud crash from inside my closet. My closet at the time was packed with junk. Admittedly, I am something of a pack rat. What changed that night was, and I swear on my grandfather's grave, I heard a little girl inside of my closet ask Mama. I turned around and noticed that the door that is directly behind my desk was open, just a few inches. Like a true X-file, I walked across the room and shut that fucker up tight. Sleep deprivation makes you hear things.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.